So, the history of Summoner's Rift. Pretty interesting to talk about since the new season is going to change the map in drastic ways. This map is a staple to League of Legends. Summoner's Rift is League of Legends. It is incredible how perfectly designed it really is. Considering that we've played in more or less the same battle arena over the last 14 to 15 years, it has stood the test of time. And generally speaking, it's pretty similar to its Season 1 counterpart. 3 lanes, red buff and blue buff, Baron, and it's always been roughly the same size. But of course, when analyzing the critical differences, that's where it's very different. Tons of nuanced details set each version of the map apart. The bushes are not exactly the same, different spots and different sizes. Jungle plants, Rift Scuttle and Herald, elemental drakes, and of course, the most useful and impactful change ever made, the alcoves. League of Legends has never been the same ever since these game-breaking additions came to the side lanes. Alright, you got me, I'm kidding. However, the Rift is going to see updates that will change the game in a drastic way, and I am all for it. It makes it the perfect time to do a little rundown, a history, if you will, of our favorite place on Earth. Our lovely abode where we get to make friends, have a great time, nothing bad ever happens, and no one ever gets upset. Now obviously the first ever version that we saw of Summoner's Rift is going to be the most bare bones. League in the old days was just a simpler time, and immediately you'll notice how different the bushes are. Some were bigger, wrapping around corners, others were in slightly different spots, and probably the most interesting little detail is this ramp. Heading up towards the Wraith camp into the jungle, there were ramps that acted as walls, even denying vision through the fog of war. I don't know if it's just nostalgia or what, but I honestly kinda like this. It makes the map feel a bit more dynamic and complex, and I'm kind of all for it. Either way, eventually these bushes would be cut down, this ramp was removed, and for several years, the map was more or less the exact same. And then there's the seasonal maps, and it's such a shame that we don't get to see these anymore. I guess I understand why, but it sucks that we value this competitive consistently so much more in this game over something cool and fun, especially since it could just be an option in the settings for you to turn off. Another big deal is that there were only 5 camps for either team. The area of the map next to the blue buff where Gromp is, that region for almost the entirety of League of Legends in the original map had no camp there. Eventually in Season 4, there was one added in to fill the void called the White Camp. With the 2015 map update, it was replaced with Gromp. These old jungle camps used to hurt a lot. Very few champions could actually even clear the jungle. There was no built-in sustain, you would not gain mana regen, and even before the jungle role was properly solidified into the meta, there was not an item for junglers specifically. Eventually, the Hunter's Machete item was added to the game, but this was the only option for many years. So junglers that were spellcasters rather than auto-attackers were still forced to take this like fiddlesticks. The jungle role was also heavily gated by runes. Remember the ones that you had to buy? Players would go into ranked games back in Season 1 without proper full rune pages. And if you didn't have a full page, you better believe you could not clear the jungle. Something I noticed when watching through old champion spotlights is how narrow these lanes look. They look more cramped or condensed, if you will. This might just be me being crazy, but do you guys feel this way too? I don't remember anything exact over the years of them specifically widening up the lanes, but what do you think? Does this look more narrow? Dragon has also changed a ton. It used to not give any bonuses whatsoever besides global gold, and it would spawn very early into the game. There was some dark technology of players trying to secure extremely early dragons, and I remember playing against some very unique strategies like a Heimerdinger solo level 1 of the Drake. This would work surprisingly well, and you would still see teams put early priority onto this dragon, sometimes even in professional play. Baron was also quite different. It used to spawn at 15 minutes, and it was subject to quite a few game-breaking bugs, with the most infamous of all time being where Poppy could displace the Baron with her E and actually move it around the map. This is hilarious. The old Summoner's Rift was legendary, but eventually all good things must come to an end, and it had to be updated. It was just time for it, and despite the old map being more iconic than the new map, I still think the 2015 one is one of the best updates this game has ever seen. With it came the new jungle, new updated camps such as the Wraiths becoming the Raptors, and a new dragon system where you would stack up buffs up to 5 times. But aside from the jungle and the dragons, and of course the visuals, the gameplay wasn't too drastically different from the original map. The real times in which Summoner's Rift saw massive gameplay changes impacting both the pacing and the feel of the game were with the plants, the elemental dragons, and the Rift Herald. Plants were very controversial when they were first announced. I still remember all of the heated debates and arguments from the community, as many players were worried about how much this would ruin the game, so to speak. It's safe to say that this was put quickly to rest, and generally speaking, the plants have been a positive addition to the game, other than the way that I felt for years the Blast Cone was particularly frustrating to play against and was very OP for junglers, but a recent change that Riot made it so this was less of an issue, which was my only true complaint with the plants. I think they're in a very healthy spot now. Elemental dragons are probably my favorite gameplay change ever, dynamically adjusting how we all play from game to game and what objectives we prioritize. These drakes are far more interesting than just some simple global gold from a dinky little dragon like in the old days. But the elemental drakes came a bit before the elemental maps. Once the maps came out, it also launched with the addition of dragon souls. Before the system that we have now, a random set of elemental drakes would just spawn and it didn't change the map at all. And then there is the Herald. For years, this has been a great way to snowball a lead and end the game quickly. Crashing the Herald into the turret leads to turret plating and massive gold leads. Herald was originally put into the game to give another neutral objective to fight over towards the top side of the map, but this has not always been the exact same objective. Originally, the Herald gave a much longer lasting buff, one that lasted not 1 minute, not 2 minutes, not even 5 minutes, but 20 whole minutes. This was a split pusher buff that allowed your side laning top laner to go crazy, honestly similar to the meta that we've had over the last year with Hullbreaker being such a prevalent meta item. And similar to the way that Hullbreaker has warped the side lane over the last year, making it impossible to beat somebody 1v1, this buff kind of accomplished the same goal. But eventually Riot deemed this unhealthy and the 20-minute buff was removed in favor of the version that we've had over the last couple of years. These gameplay changes have obviously impacted the pace of play and made the Rift truly a different experience than it used to be. The game has never been faster, more gank-oriented, and more team play focused. It's not just that players have gotten better at the game, which is of course completely true, but also the game is more complicated and quicker than it's ever been. With the plants, the explosiveness and power that comes from the dragons and the dragon souls, League is more complicated than it used to be. And to tell you the truth, it's about to get even more complex and interesting with the new season. Let's talk about the new Summoner's Rift. Before discussing any objectives, we need to go over the actual map layout. We haven't seen the Rift itself change like this ever. It is unprecedented to see such drastic changes, but I am all for it. The general thought process behind these changes is reducing the amount of advantage gained from being on a specific side of the map. On the old Rift, top lane red side could be ganked both through the river and from behind, making blue side have a clear advantage. Similarly, for blue side on bot lane, anytime they were pushed up, you would need to make sure the tri-brush behind you was warded and not just the river. Red side bot lane has always been much more difficult to dive as the jungler, as you needed to go around the wall first and the path was not nearly as direct. This has now changed in a massive way. We'll start with the river. The bushes have been removed that were up against the wall, and now there's just a single bush in the middle. If this is control warded, then it's very easy to keep your vision controlled, so to speak. The walls have also been pushed back, and the red side has been given a massive wall to make it so that red side top lane can easily match the safety to push up that blue side always had. Bot lane river is the same way, with the singular bush, and red side bot lane is now much more open to being dove with a clear and direct path straight into the tower. The mid lane has also been changed. The bushes have been pushed back and the lane has been widened. This gives more time to laners to react to ganks from both the jungler and the support, and I think that's the key reason why this has been changed. At the highest level over the last couple of years, mid lane has not even been close to a 1v1 role. Mid lane priority is up to the subject of a 3v3. In challenger games, every time the support recalls, they were running straight mid lane. If you want to dive the mid laner, you will now likely have to tank an additional turret shot, but at the same time, it's also a more direct path into the mid lane, which is definitely true as well. So similar to bot lane maybe being easier to dive but harder to gank generally speaking, I think that mid lane is going to see the same thing. Now, a lot of bot laners have felt the game has been determined by how often the jungler ganks their lane and takes dragon, and the importance of dragon stacking has been of the utmost priority in the past couple of years, even after Riot nerfed their stats. And that's largely because other than the Herald, there wasn't a huge incentive to spend time towards the top side if Dragon was available, but that's now changing with the addition of Void Grubs. The first Rift Herald has been completely replaced by grubs. Spawning at 5 minutes, 3 of them will come out, and they have their own independent respawn timers. Up to a total of 6 can spawn per game. They give a buff that provides extra damage to turrets, and if you're able to slay more than 5, you'll start spawning in the Void Mites and destroy turrets even faster. Herald now comes in much later into the game and has several upgrades. You can still crash it automatically like before, but a teammate can now ride it and drive it. Yes, drive it like a Scion ultimate. What is so fascinating about this is that the Herald can now be used for combat purposes. Rather than simply just auto-crashing it into the turret, taking the Herald comes with even more possibilities than before. With these two extremely strong ways to take down towers, games on the Rift should be more explosive than ever before, and I now view the Rift as sort of split into 2 major sections for strategy based on comp. If your comp is early game focused and you want to end the game, you should almost always be looking to make plays around the objectives on the top side of the map. Grabbing both Void Grubs and Herald allows you to push and end the game early. But if your comp is more scaling based and you're able to wave clear, you'll want to look to secure dragons and play for the long con, scaling and getting the soul. Obviously, in a strong game state where you're completely snowballing, smashing, and your team is way ahead, you'll want to get both objectives on either side of the map. You'll just want to get as many globals as you can and push and end. But more than ever before, I do see the map as having very clear objectives to take on both top and bot side, and you can play for them. And you know, maybe there's a chance we'll even see some alternative strategies come up this year. We're already seeing a Master Yi duo top lane gain some prominence with the support item coming out of the Chinese servers. Maybe some new strats and new meta tactics will come out this year and gain popularity. Who knows? The 20-minute mark now enters a new stage of the game. Not just because Baron has spawned, but for this season, the whole map will change as well at 20 minutes. Rift Scuttle will upgrade, and when killed, will grant a Scryer's Bloom type of explosion on vision. This will spot enemy champions and reveal wards. Blue and red buff will also upgrade. They'll be much harder to kill, but once a certain team member kills the buff, it will now be granted to the entire team of 5. So yes, in late game fights, quite literally all 10 players may be wearing double buffs. And finally, Baron now has multiple layouts and potential terrain options, which will massively change how either hard or easy it is to take for certain teams. The Baron itself is also much harder to take than ever before, and we're likely not going to see the T1 20-minute Baron rush anymore. So I'm really excited to see what will happen in LCK with this being so different. How will teams adapt to this new Baron strength, because it's way more difficult to kill? Will Baron flips even be a thing anymore? Who knows? So that's the history of Summoner's Rift. We've never seen such a crazy year coming up in terms of changes to our favorite battle arena, and I think we should all be incredibly hyped for it. What do you guys think of the new map and the new season? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching, and come check out my stream. I'm a non-toxic streamer whose main goal is to focus on interacting with you guys and having fun. I'm not going to flame my team or get upset over a video game, and I'm here to interact with chat, play some games, and have a great time. If that sounds interesting to you, you will absolutely enjoy your stay. Thank you so much. Love you so much.